Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them. Wolves. And I know a lot of you are thinking that wolves are kind of humdrum compared to some of the other monsters you can run in Dungeons and Dragons. And maybe. I like wolves. Wolves are... This is going to sound bad, and I don't want to sound like a wimp, but if you really want something to be afraid of, just look at nature. Nature can be terrifying. Okay? You don't have to put a monster, a big bad, dragon or whatever in there. A pack of wolves can seriously disable or even kill the entire party. I did a video a while back where a pack of wolves attacked and killed almost everybody in the party. And they were like, well, I want to say one guy was up a tree, and they said, well, when the wolves leave, we'll go down and resurrect them or whatever. And the wolves ended up eating everybody. They ended up getting everybody, as I recall. Anyway, the point being, one of the more dangerous types of monsters are the ones that run in groups or packs, and their goal is food. They're not looking to steal your stuff. They're looking to eat your flesh. That right there should terrify the crap out of your players. Wolves are bad enough. I've done videos where they figure prominently, as I said. Dire wolves are just big prehistoric wolves. They're not intelligent per se, but they're much bigger and meaner. Wargs are big, evil, intelligent, dire wolves with language. Winter wolves are a whole other level of dangerous. They're intelligent. They have language. They can think. Plan, like wargs. They can think. They can plan strategies and tactics. Wolves can be found on page 101 of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. Wolves are 2+2 hit die critters who travel in packs up to 20 in number. You put 10 of these on a group of players, it can be bad. Dire wolves are 3+3 hit die critters who travel in packs up to 12 in number. You put 6 of these on a group of players, they're up shit creek. Wargs are evil neo-dire wolves. They have 4+4 hit dice, and they travel in packs up to 12. 6 wargs are just freaking nasty. But now we get to the really, really bad ones. Winter wolves are evil, intelligent monsters. They're intelligent monsters with a breath weapon. They run in packs up to 8 in number. Okay? So wargs and winter wolves are intelligent and they have their own language. They can communicate with each other. Normal critters are bad enough. Excuse me. Normal critters, the normal wolves, are bad enough. The wargs are much worse. The dire wolves are just big wolves. Wargs, however, are much worse. The winter wolves are orders of magnitude worse because they are intelligent, which means they can use tactics and devise plans to tackle player character groups, and they have a breath weapon. If a pack of winter wolves can set a trap for a group of player characters, they stand a good chance of killing all of them. Let me elaborate. Years ago, I was part of a group of player characters heading up a mountain to investigate some ruins. We've all done that. That's a standard plot in many Dungeons and Dragons games. We're going to go and see what's in those ruins over there. Somebody's paying us to clean out those ruins, whatever. Excuse me. Well, we were heading up the mountain. We were ambushed by a pack of 6 winter wolves. We were 6th level characters, and our ranger was on point. The other 4 of us were behind him. The wolves were on high points overlooking the path, 3 on each side. They achieved surprise, and their initial frosty howl from all sides dropped my wizard and the thief and damaged all of the others. The next round, the cleric tried to heal the thief and brought him to consciousness. The fighter hit one of the winter wolves with his spear. The wolves attacked and killed the cleric and the ranger. The dwarven fighter attacked, but missed, The next round, the wolves killed the two fighters and the thief. It was a total party kill, and the winter wolves ate well. Remember, they're not looking for your stuff. They're looking for your flesh. They want to eat you. Don't discount wolves of any type, but especially wargs and winter wolves, because they're a whole other type of thing. They're not the wolves you see running around in the woods. That's all I'm saying. Again, read up on these very, very, very thoroughly before you use them. And remember, intelligent creatures are always more dangerous to fight because they can think and they can plan. All right? They can lead you into ambushes. They can set traps. They can do all kinds of different things. It opens up an entire world of possibilities for the Dungeon Master. The Boalisk. I thought I'd already done this, but I can't find it in my channel anywhere, so I'm going to go ahead and do it now. Before I get into this, if you enjoy my content, it would really help me out if you would hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, share my content on social media, and post a comment or two. Remember, I welcome your comments, even if you disagree with me. If you enjoy a good book, check out my author page on Amazon. My pen name is H.L. Anderson. You can find all of my books there. I like to think I write good stories that make you think. I wrote a 3-book series, science fiction western series called Drifters. I wrote a fun story about a house in New Orleans where the monsters all hang out. It's called The House Off Farrago Road. I wrote a political fantasy called The Righteous President. And I've got 2 of them so far. I'm working on the 3rd one. The first one is Vanguard 1. The second one is Task Force Terminus. They're science fiction, futuristic space warfare. But it's a study of humanity from an alien perspective. I hope you enjoy them. I hope you get them. I hope you enjoy them. All right. On with the Boalisk. As a dungeon master, you always want to surprise your players if you can. I always like to find exotic and strange creatures to run against my players. One of the best ways to really throw them a curveball is to present them with a creature which they think is a specific type of creature, but in reality has some abilities that are much more deadly, more of a surprise. Enter the Boalisk. The Boalisk can be found on page 19 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Be sure to read through the description very, very thoroughly before using them in your game. They can be a little complex, and they can also be extremely deadly for your players. One of the more dangerous aspects of the Boalisk is almost completely skimmed over right in the very, very first sentence. It appears as a normal snake. That's where most players get sucked in. Most players will think it's a snake. That's no problem. I can kill a snake, right? That's where the trouble starts. There's a 1 in 3 chance that they will meet the snake's gaze and be petrified with no savings throw. Others, after the initial gaze attack, who fail their saves versus petrification, are afflicted with a rotting disease as per a mummy. Yeah, it's got multiple whammy there. Again, this creature's primary attack is the gaze, and it can do this in addition to its normal attacks, which is bite and constrict. The fact that it appears as a normal snake will allow surprise attacks quite easily. One important part of this creature's stats is that the number appearing is 1 to 3. In a worst case scenario, 3 player characters can be petrified right at the beginning of the encounter, and that can be devastating for any group. Most groups average 4 to 6 players. If 2 or 3 of them are gone right at the beginning, yeah, that party's in some serious kimchi, let me tell you. Years ago, I was running a game with 5 players. They ran into 3 of these Boalisks, and the battle started off with the player characters mistaking them for normal snakes. The group was camped for the night, and the thief was on guard duty. He saw the snakes, and he rolled a 1 on his D6. His player character didn't realize what they were and was instantly petrified when they met his gaze. The group had a chance to wake up, and 3 of them did so. The mage and the cleric both rolled 1s and 2s, and they were petrified. The third one, a fighter, roused his fellow player character, the barbarian. They each contracted the rotting sickness before killing the snakes. Yeah. The two survivors could not reach town before the sickness killed them. It was a total party kill, and there was little any of them could do about it. These boalists don't seem extremely dangerous if you look at their stat sheet, but when you read the description, petrification automatic with no savings throw if they catch you by surprise, that right there by itself is bad. But even if you do kill them, you can still contract, the player characters can still contract the rotting disease, which is just nasty. Be very, very careful how you run a bolus against your group. If they have no cure for petrification or no way to treat the rotting disease, their level and number of hit points may very well be irrelevant. That's the one of the nastier parts of this bolus. It doesn't really matter about the level. Bolusks are easy to kill. It's that surprise attack that gets you. It's just nasty. Giant scorpions. Before I get into the video, though, I want to let everybody know that I hope everybody had a really great Christmas, and I hope everybody had a happy New Year. I wish nothing but blessings on everybody from this new year. I hope everybody has a great year. I also want to let you know about a book that I just recently got published, The House Off Farrago Road. It's available on Amazon. The author's name is H.L. Anderson. It's just a fun story about a house where the denizens are not quite normal. Mythological creatures and supernatural forces commingle with modern-day law enforcement and the criminal underworld. If the quirky weird piques your interest, check out The House Off Farrago Road, available on Amazon. All right, here we go. Giant scorpions. I've played Advanced Dungeons & Dragons for over 47 years, and I've been running it since 1979. I have seen many monsters used in the game both for and against me, and, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous creatures in the game is a creature who can kill a character no matter their level, regardless of the number of hit points they have, just by failing a savings throw, for example. Enter the Giant Scorpion. Giant scorpions can be found on pages 85 and 86 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. Be sure to read through the description very thoroughly before you use them in your game. I have to admit a certain preference for these particular creatures because as a child I remember seeing movies such as Jason and the Argonauts and The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. The giant creatures which the legendary Ray Harryhausen brought to life with his stop-motion animation were, oh my god, terrifying when I was a kid. If you've not seen these movies, you are truly missing out. Normal scorpions are scary. I live in New Mexico. Normal scorpions are scary. Imagine one that's the size of a man. Yeah. Giant scorpions have a good armor class, 3, and 5+5 hit dice, which makes them tough combatants. Then you add in pinchers, 2, each inflicting 1d10 damage. That's like a halberd there. And you have a dangerous threat. On top of that, you add in the segmented tail with a stinger, which kills on a hit unless the victim makes a savings throw versus poison. Yeah, that's just freaking terrifying. Scorpions can attack 3 times each round. Once with each pincher and then once with the stinger. And they can be devastating. In my opinion, the stinger tail is one of the most dangerous and deadly weapons in the game because regardless of the bonuses or level, a victim has a bare minimum of a 5% chance to be killed outright. A fumbled savings throw fails no matter what. Remember that. Regardless of how powerful a character is, any player can roll a fumble, period. I'm going to do a video next week on a game that we played just the other day. My son and my wife and son and I were working on creating an entirely new Dungeons and Dragons world as Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as a project, because we're in northeastern New Mexico. There ain't nothing to do. So anyway, we were working on a project there, and we got most of it done. My son wanted to run one for Christmas, so we rolled up a couple of characters. I rolled up a druid, she rolled up a ranger, and it's long story short, we had combat, and it was oh my god embarrassing. Between the two of us, we rolled something like 17 fumbles in 2 hours. We rolled more fumbles than misses. Statistically, you're going to miss more than hit because, the way the armor class is done. But we rolled more fumbles than misses. That was sad. That was sad. Now, I mean, 5% is 5%, and the laws of averages were basically bent us over the table on that one, let me tell you. My point is, fumbles happen to anyone. Okay? Lord knows I've had my share. On top of all of that, giant scorpions have a 75% chance to not be alone. They travel in groups of 1 to 4. A group of 3 giant scorpions can sting 3 times in each round. That's 3 saving throws each round of combat. In any group of players, if they are forced to make 3 saving throws each round, how many fumbles will they roll? How many failed saving throws will they roll? Ultimately, you're looking at a few dead player characters. That's just the way it is. I did a video about giant skunks, and in that video I said that giant versions of any creature can be deadly. In this case, normal scorpions are deadly. Giant scorpions are, oh my god, horrific. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Try using a few scorpions in your game. It'll scare the hell out of your players, if nothing else. Giant wasp. Now, I'm upfront and be honest with you. I hate wasps. I hate bees. Anytime I find a nest, it's pretty much on my kill list immediately. Most people I know feel the same way. Bees, on the other hand, they're a little different. Bees, they produce honey and they're good for the ecology. I don't know what wasps do for anybody except for sting them. So, bees I can tolerate. I don't like them, but I can tolerate them. Wasps, no, I can't stand them. In real life, a wasp sting is both painful and very, very vicious. Now, imagine if that wasp was the size of a man. Yeah. Giant wasps can be found on page 99 of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. Be sure to read through the description very, very thoroughly before you use them in your game. I say that all the time, but with these, it can be, yeah. Giant wasps are 4 hit die critters which bite for 2 to 8 points of damage. They also sting for another 1 to 4 points. They get both those attacks every round. On top of that, if they hit with their stinger, the victim must make a saving throw versus poison or become paralyzed permanently. Those paralyzed will die in 1d4 plus 1 days, 2 to 5 days, unless a neutralized poison spell or an antidote is applied. Victims of this poison are generally devoured by the young wasps during that 2 to 5 days. So wasps are not intelligent per se, but they feed their young like every animal does. Any kind of an animal would do that, and this is how they do it. So they're not actually trying to get your stuff. They're not trying to kill you and rob you. They're trying to kill you and feed their kids. In my opinion, one wasp really isn't that bad. A group of players can usually deal with it pretty handily. But the real danger lies in the fact that the number of appearing is 1 to 20. That's a mean average of between 10 and 12 wasps in any given group. A 4 hit die critter has a decent chance to hit. Imagine a dungeon master with 10 to 12 rolls to attack twice per round. Yeah. So that's 20 to 24 attacks per round. Half of those you have to save versus poison. The group this suddenly becomes a serious threat to a group of 4 to 7 mid-level characters. 5, 6 level characters with a modicum of intelligence should flee from a dozen giant wasps. All it takes is a failed savings throw and poison, versus poison, and a player character is down. That can devastate a party easily. I was running a game years ago and I had 5 players, all 7th and 8th level. I randomly rolled on an encounter table and it came up giant wasps. When I rolled my d20 and got a 15, so there were 15 of these giant wasps. The group was walking along in the woods under an overhang of rock, trying to avoid an oncoming storm. They were looking for a place to wait out while the storm went by. And it wasn't raining yet, but it was close. They were surprised by the giant wasps who had a nest under this overhang. The first round of combat got the wasps hits. It became a bloodbath. The wasps had surprise. So on the first round, 8 of them got hits. The magic user, the cleric, and the barbarian, you're going to love this, all failed their savings throws versus poison. Barbarians normally have these huge saves, bonuses to their savings throw versus poison, and the barbarian rolled a 1. The others failed miserably as well. They were all down. Those 3 characters were all down. The fighter and the thief were pulled their weapons and got ready to fight. The thief critted and killed a wasp, and they were both, after that, both of them were struck repeatedly. They eventually failed their savings throws, and the entire party died. 5 decent level player characters died because of failed savings throws. Giant wasps can be exceedingly dangerous. Again, they're not intelligent, but they're organized and they're looking to feed their family. That's all it is. And trying to keep an animal from feeding its family can be very, very dangerous. These wasps don't mess around. If you fail your savings throw versus poison, your character is down. And that's that. If the entire group goes down, the entire group dies because there's nobody around to help them. The Bloodthorn. Before I get into this video, I'd like to tell you about a book I just got published called The House Off Farrago Road. My new book, The House Off Farrago Road, is now available on Amazon. It's just a fun story about a house where the denizens are not quite normal. Mythological creatures and supernatural forces commingle with modern-day law enforcement and the criminal underworld. If the quirky weird piques your interest, check out The House Off Farrago Road. It's available at Amazon with all my other books. I've got 3 books, a series, a science fiction western series called Drifters. I've got another book called it's a political fantasy called The Righteous President. And I've got a science fiction, kind of a military type science fiction book called Vanguard 1. All of my books are available on Amazon. Go check them out. All right. On with the video. I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for over 47 years. I've been running it since 1979. I've used tons of different monsters against my players over the years, and I found that player characters can have a crap ton of different abilities and defenses to ward off and avoid damage. They can also have a crap ton of hit points. Higher level characters can have an abundance of hit points. One of the most dangerous types of creatures, in my opinion, is the type that can bypass or somehow eliminate such abilities or ignore the abundance of hit points. Usually this involves poison or some magical way to immobilize or trap the player characters. Like where if they fail a savings throw, they die, or they get trapped somewhere, or they're out of the game, or that kind of thing. The Bloodthorn is such a creature. Essentially, the plant reduces each target to 4 hit points. Let me elaborate. The Bloodthorn can be found on page 18 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Be sure to read up on it very, very carefully before using it in your game. These things can destroy your party easily. Okay? That's your warning, because they can. The Bloodthorn has a number of tendrils, or vines if you prefer, with which it lashes its prey. That's its attack form. The tendrils are lined with many sharp hollow thorns. On each strike, the hollow thorns drain fluids from the victim, totaling a quarter of their original hit points. This means it only takes 4 hits to kill any player character, regardless of their hit points. And since this creature can have up to 8 attacks per round, this thing can slice through player character parties like a buzzsaw. The Bloodthorn resembles hornwood trees very, very closely, and this is one of its more devastating elements. A group of player characters traveling through a hornwood grove, they can walk right by one and they won't notice. If they don't notice, the Bloodthorn stands a good chance to decimate several player characters on the first round with a surprise attack. The last time I used one of these in my game was about 12 years ago. A group of 5 player characters encountered a Bloodthorn, and the plant was able to achieve a surprise attack. The Barbarian and the Wizard were both killed in the initial round of combat. They never even got to roll initiatives. It was like, okay, what's your armor class? Right. Okay, you took so many. Okay, you're both dead. What? Yeah, you both died. But that was it. That was the battle for them. In the second round, the Bloodthorn got first initiative, and it managed to hack the Cleric and the Fighter both to death. The Thief attacked and did some damage, and then did some more the next round. Then the Bloodthorn finished him off. It was a total party kill of a group of 5 14th level characters. And it was ridiculous. One Bloodthorn did that. These things can destroy a bunch of your player characters in a jiffy. If they don't see, if they're walking through the forest near some some hornwood trees, and they don't notice it, it's like walking into a buzzsaw. It's worse than a minefield. And it only takes one to kill them, which, these things don't travel in groups, but it only takes one of these things to destroy your entire party. It's crazy. If you want to use these, please read up on them very, very thoroughly. Make sure the players are prepared for such a thing, if they can be. But again, the Bloodthorn literally ignores how many hit points they have. It takes 4 hits to kill a character, and that's it. It's crazy. Yeah, just be very careful using these in your game. If you get a chance, be sure and read up on them. And, all I'm saying is if you're going to use them, be very careful how you do it. Make sure you get all the rules correct. Because if you mess up on a rule, the players will let you know. And in this particular instance, I would be one of those players. Wait a minute. Let's nitpick. Tentamort. But before we get into this video, I'd like to tell you about a new book that I just got published called The House Off Farrago Road. It's available on Amazon.com. The author's name is H.L. Anderson. That's me. And it's just a fun story about a house where the denizens are not quite normal. Mythological creatures and supernatural forces commingle with modern-day law enforcement and the criminal underworld. If the quirky weird piques your interest, check out The House Off Farrago Road. Alright, now, on with this video. The Tentamort. This creature appears as a 2-foot sphere with a number of small tentacles, along with 2 large tentacles. The small tentacles are lined with suckers which allow the creature to attack itself to almost any surface, and it can move across that surface. It moves rather slowly, but it can move across the surface. Any surface, walls, ceilings, floors, whatever. The large tentacles are the dangerous ones. The Tentamort can be found on page 86 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Fiend Folio. Be sure to read through the description very, very carefully before you use it in your game. This thing has some weird abilities, and it's better to know before you run them. Make sure it fits your game. The first of the large tentacles is a constrictor. It lashes victims as a whip for 1d6 damage on an attack roll of 2 or greater than that required to hit. This tentacle wraps itself around the victim, pinning its arms to its side, and will automatically constrict for 1d6 damage each round until either the tentacle or the victim is dead. So in other words, the first tentacle, you roll to hit, and if it hits it'll whip them for a d6 damage. No problem. If it rolls 2 better than what's required to hit, or if it rolls a crit, so say it needs a 15, right? So if you roll a 17 or better, or a natural crit, then this thing will wrap around and constrict for a d6, and you don't have to roll to hit anymore. That's just nasty. The other tentacle is the really bad one, though. It has a 6-inch hollow bone needle attached to the end of it. This tentacle whips and wraps up victims as the first one does. However, instead of constricting it, when it wraps them up, instead of constricting, this one stabs the victim with that bone needle. And that bone needle is nasty. It paralyzes the victim unless the victim makes a savings throw versus paralyzation. The tentamort then injects a saliva-like substance through the needle over a 2-round period. And this is just for a man-sized victim, it takes 2 rounds. For smaller victims like halflings, it takes half that length, that time. For larger victims, it takes twice as long or more. This substance softens the victim's internal organs, which are then sucked out through the bone needle. Yeah, this is just nasty. Because one of the nastiest parts about this is it doesn't matter how many hit points a person has, it kills them. It takes a couple of rounds, boom, and you're done. Killing this tentacle during injection. A man-sized victim will die after 2 rounds of this suction. So if a guy's got 100 hit points, 2 rounds, he's dead. Still. Okay. Killing this tentacle during injection is good, but the victim must then be saved with a cure disease spell within an hour, or he will still die. Once the complete dose has been delivered, only a heal spell or a regenerate spell followed by a cure wound spell will save the victim. So even if you kill off the tentamort or destroy the tentacle that's injecting him, you still have to take steps, and they're pretty hefty steps. Regenerate and cure wounds. So, one of the most dangerous aspects of this creature is they travel in packs. Up to 10 of them can be present. Can you imagine fighting 10 of these things with a group of 8 player characters? That would suck. Now, years ago, I was playing in my friend Gerald's game. None of us knew what a tentamort was. And one of these things injected our wizard with a complete dose before we were able to kill it. An hour later, our wizard still died because we had no idea what was going on. We didn't know that it injected him with this stuff, and he ended up dying anyway. It was crazy. He was upset with us, but what the hell were we supposed to do? We didn't know. Nobody knew at that time. So, At any rate, these things can be quite dangerous. Be sure and check them out before you put them in your game. And as a player character, it might not be a bad idea to read up on them. The gas spores. As a dungeon master, I'm always looking for new ways to surprise my players. Many players expect to run into big bad monsters, which is why the gas spore is so darned effective. The gas spore is listed on page 42 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. Be sure to read up on it very, very thoroughly before you use them in your game. They can devastate your group very easily. In general, most player characters tend to charge at the monster to hit it with their biggest and baddest weapon, especially barbarians and fighters. This particular creature takes full advantage of that. Gas spores appear as beholders, 90% at a distance and 25% at close range. It's a useful facade, I guess. And this is part of their lure. Most players see a Beyonder and automatically want to kill it before it can use its powers. Hence all the fighters running over to hit it. Once a gas spore takes at least 1 point of damage, it explodes for 6 to 36 points of damage. And they can save for half to only taking 3 to 18. But that's still a lot of damage. And it's a 20-foot radius. So everybody jumps in there to hit it. Everybody misses except for the last guy. He swings and hits. Everybody takes the explosive damage. This damage can, this damage can really, really hurt your players because it is an explosive type thing. On top of that, these things travel in groups, so up to 3 of these can be together at a time. This damage can quickly be multiplied. This is another one of those dangerous points because you see 3 of them, you hit one of them, It explodes. That explosion gets the next one. It explodes. That explosion gets the next one. It explodes. You can take out a whole corridor full of players. It's crazy. However, should the gas spore attack first and make contact with exposed flesh, the spore infects the victim with tiny rhizomes, which kills them within 24 hours if they do not get a cure disease spell. There is no savings throw. They get this stuff. It's on them. They don't know it. 24 hours later, they drop dead. And once dead, the victim sprouts 2 to 8 gas spores. This is how the creature reproduces. It's crazy. Now, years ago, I hesitated using these because these people, these players that I had in the game, most of them were okay. There was a couple of them that were nitpicky about everything. It was a beholder. Why did it explode? That kind of thing. So anyway, I hesitated using them, and finally, one of the other players said something to me that it kind of stuck with me. If you're catering your game to one player or two players, the rest of them suffer. And he's absolutely right. I took that to heart. So, when they were traveling down the corridor, here we go. Years ago, I was running a group of 5 players through a tunnel system under the ruins of an old fortification. In a cavern roughly 10 foot wide, they ran into 3 gas spores. They immediately thought they were beholders, of course. They'd rounded the corner and literally ran into them. The furthest one away was 20 feet. The barbarian thought that they were beholders, so he charged the first one, or the furthest one, with his battle axe. His reasoning was that the group could deal with the nearest ones while he took the furthest one. The resultant explosion damaged everyone. The other gas spores detonated as well, and the only survivor was the barbarian, and he was hurt so badly that he fell unconscious. He was captured by slavers and had to facilitate an escape 3 weeks later. Yeah, those other 2 players were not happy, but when I guess, for lack of a better word, peer pressure from the other players got involved, they understood what was going on, and they did their thing. They were okay with it after that. But yeah, first moral: never let 1 or 2 players dictate how you run your game. The other moral is sometimes it's not always a beholder. As I'm just saying, sometimes things aren't always as they seem. The Carrion Crawler. One of the favorite activities of player characters in Dungeons & Dragons is to explore underground areas. The name Dungeons & Dragons implies that dungeons are a staple and dungeons are generally found underground, so there you go. There are a wide variety of monsters which can be found underground, many of which are quite fearsome. Just any perusal of the books will tell you that. Enter the Carrion Crawler. Carrion crawlers can be found on page 13 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. Be sure to read through the description very thoroughly before you use them in your game. My opinion, there are 3 things which make the Carrion Crawler dangerous. The first is the fact that it can crawl on walls and ceilings as easily as it walks on floors. It moves at 12 double mark, which is pretty damn fast. So it can close rapidly in darkness for surprise. So they're going through the tunnel or whatever in the underground cavern, and they may hear a skittering noise, and while they're looking around and trying to find it, this thing's already on them. Yeah, and it can come on the walls, the ceiling, the floor. You see a door, and you're looking around, you don't see nothing. You step inside, and above the door, it's right there. I mean, I've seen weird things like that in this game. I've actually done things like that in this game to players. So, keep that in mind. The second thing is the tentacles. They each, have 8 tentacles which exude a gummy secretion. This secretion causes paralysis to any victim which it hits. As per the book, each tentacle that hits requires a save versus paralyzation. It is a 3+1 hit die critter, which means it hits pretty well. I mean, it's got a decent chance to hit. With surprise, any group of player characters will have a hard time with a carrion crawler. And in my opinion, the third thing that makes them extremely dangerous, carrion crawlers travel in groups of from 1 to 6. That's a mean average of 4 in a group. Four carrion crawlers, with 8 tentacles each equals 32 attacks. Each one of them requires, they require a 16 to hit armor class 0. So that's a 25% base chance to hit. But 25% of 32 equals 8 hits. Now, if they get surprised, that means it's only a 12 to hit. Yeah. But even with the 25%, that's 8 hits, and most player character groups are less than 8 players. With enough hits, eventually everyone will fail the save versus paralyzation, and they're done. Okay? This isn't... with monsters like this, it's not so much they're going to hit and do lots of damage, but they hit, and every time they hit, they have to make the save versus paralyzation every single time. Eventually, you're going to fail. A 1 fails no matter what. Eventually, you're going to fail. And it becomes just a numbers game. Years ago, I was running a group of 5 8th level player characters in a dungeon crawl. The thief was checking for traps, and he never made his rolls. This guy failed every freaking roll. He was the unluckiest thief ever. He virtually always failed. In one corridor, and this was a random encounter, in one corridor, 5 carrion crawlers were on the ceiling in the darkness, and none of the player characters noticed them. The crawlers attacked with surprise from above. All of the player characters were paralyzed in the first round. It was a total party kill. 8th level characters, total party kill, and they never even got to roll initiatives. It was crazy. Now, the sad part is, these people had decent armor classes. I think I hit each one, I hit most of them once, but some of them I had to hit twice. But the average number of hits was far lower than what I stated, statistically. But it doesn't matter, because they were failing saving throws. And that's all it takes for a carrion crawler to get you. Because once you're paralyzed, it grabs you and takes you back to feed the young. You're done. If 1 or 2 of them had survived, they could have left and then come back later to rescue them, or, it wouldn't have been a total party kill at least. But, yeah, they all died. And there wasn't anything anybody could do about it. Now, normally I'm not that mean to player characters. However, these particular players were kind of being assholes. So, And I didn't hedge anything. I didn't change any numbers. Everything was randomly rolled. Everything was done per the books. I didn't beef up the critters any. Carrion crawlers don't need it, and it was a random encounter. So But after that, their attitudes improved, and we had a hell of a good game after that. The Eye of Fear and Flame. The Eye of Fear and Flame is one of the more insidious monsters in the game. It can be found on page 35 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Fiend Folio. Be sure to read the description very, very thoroughly before you use it in your game. Not only can they devastate your party in a physical confrontation, but prior to that, they can easily disrupt the harmony of your player character group. I think that's where they have their most devastating capabilities. Any monster can attack, and any monster can have devastating capabilities to attack. But when they can turn the party against each other, That right there is just insidious. Requires mature gamers. If your gamers are not mature, I wouldn't use this monster in your game. It requires gamers who understand role playing. They understand that it's role playing and it's not real life. I have had players who, when confronted with this type of an assault, where the monster's trying to turn players against each other, they take it personally. Yeah, you gotta be careful of that. If you have players who are going to do that, you don't want to use an Eye of Fear and Flame, because that's their forte. The Eye can command player characters to do evil deeds. If the commands are not obeyed, or if the Eye of Fear and Flame is attacked, it will defend itself. If the commands are not obeyed, it will attack. If it is attacked, it will defend itself. One Eye casts a 12 hit die fireball every 3 rounds. The other Eye acts as a fear wand every 3 rounds. It can escape ethereally if necessary. It rarely needs to do that. If a blindness spell or a power word blind spell are cast on it, they are reflected back at the caster. I had one guy say, well, it's an eye, let's blind it. Boom. And yeah, it didn't work well. The commands that it gives are presumably through a type of command spell. So, whenever I have ever run an Eye of Fear and Flame against people, against a group, I try to coerce. I try to persuade. You know? If that doesn't work, I have them make a savings throw. If that doesn't work, it just didn't work. Okay? Once that saving throw has failed, that's it. They have avoided that attack form. You got to try something else. As the monster, you have to try something else. There are times when just basic persuasion works. Okay? Now, the Eye of Fear Flame has a good armor class, 2, but no melee combat ability. Is highly intelligent, so play it as such. I always try to run these monsters with some form of underlings. If that is not possible, then I try to use the Fear Eye to thin the ranks and then move to a safe location while using the fireballs to pound the group of remaining player characters. The weakness of this creature is its lack of melee ability. If the player character is close to melee range, it will be difficult to survive. Like a good boxer, you need to stick and move. That's what it boils down to. I had a group of player characters run afoul of an Eye of Fear and Flame a few years back. The Eye commanded one to attack the others while they slept. The thief was able to murder the paladin and the cleric before he was discovered. The group killed the thief, and the remaining characters, a fighter and a wizard, attacked the Eye. The fighter failed his save versus fear and fled. The 12 hit die fireball killed the wizard. These things can be deadly if used properly. The only one to survive that whole encounter was the fighter, because he ran away because of a fear spell. He failed a saving throw and he ran away. Everybody else died. These things can be devastating if used properly. Now, should I say bludgeon them with an Eye of Fear and Flame? No. You play the game accordingly. Excuse me, you play the monsters accordingly. If the player characters die, they die. If the player characters win, they win. Don't hedge the bet, as it were. But keep in mind, these things are highly intelligent, so play them as such. They're not stupid. The Vision. And no, I'm not talking about the character from Marvel Comics. That's a great character, but that's not who I'm talking about. Visions are one of the more insidious monsters in the game. They can be found on page 93 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Theme Folio. Be sure to read up on it very, very thoroughly before you use it in your game. I say that all the time. Make sure you read up on this one, because there's some differences from other monsters. These things can be exceedingly dangerous, especially to half-orcs and humans, whose lifespans are more finite than elves or dwarves. Visions are not natural creatures, but rather were created by a high-level but foolish illusionist. Note their special defenses and their magic resistance. These things are ethereal, and it's hard to hit them in the prime material plane. Most characters that I'm familiar with don't really do a lot in the ethereal plane, so keep that in mind. These critters are, oh my god, ridiculous. They are highly intelligent, and they are lawful evil in alignment, so not only are they really evil, but they want to hurt you. They want to profit off of your demise. They have their own interests. They don't give a shit about you. Sorry. Keep in mind that these critters cannot return home until their physical manifestations have been destroyed. They want to be destroyed, and they want to take as many living beings with them as possible. Their attack causes aging in their victim. Note that there's a special saving throw method needed to avoid this said aging, so, keep that in mind. Also note that the only way these things can be encountered is if someone or something summons them. They do not want to be here. On the prime material plane, their armor class is excellent. It's very difficult to hit them. I mentioned that earlier. They appear as shadows and are semi-ethereal. This means that in the Underdark, where they prefer to stay, they are excellent at sneak attacks. Since they appear as shadows, they are 90% undetectable. They can hide near a group of player characters and wait until they are standing in a group. When the vision reveals itself, everyone witnessing them must make the special savings throw. When the vision attacks, when this thing attacks and it's doing its thing, and the attack peters out, and the attack is no longer effective for because everybody's made their save, he can simply fade into the darkness and escape, because he has no way to affect them other than this aging. So he can sit there, and if people keep failing their saves, they keep aging. Well, if you're a human, you have a finite lifespan. If you're a half-orc, oh my god, you have a finite lifespan. I like running humans and half-orcs, but they don't live very long. Not naturally. So when they age, they become old and useless pretty damn quick. They can even age to death pretty quick. Years ago, I had 6 players in a group that encountered one of these visions. Both half-orc fighters died. The human aged to almost uselessness. Half of the group was lost due to one encounter, and they never even hit it one time. It could no longer affect them, so it just left. It just, oh, well, okay, whatever, and it left. And the party was decimated. Half the group was dead or useless. These things can really mess up your group, so as a dungeon master, be careful how you use them. Yeah, we're getting some rain. Be careful how you use them. If you're going to use them, keep that in mind. And read up on them before you use them. Just make sure you read on them, everything that goes with them, because there's a lot. The cockatrice. I've been playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons for 47 years, and I've been running it since 1979. And as a dungeon master, there are tons of different monsters and creatures that you can use to befuddle, fool, or otherwise confound your players. Many monsters are of the ugh-kill variety. Those are fun for your players to encounter because it's a straight-up fight. Your players get to exercise their bloodthirsty nature. Sometimes it's just fun to hack, slash, and bash, And that's cool. Some monsters, however, require your players to use the old noodle. Monsters like the symbiotic jelly and the Rakshasa, they demand more from your players. Some players simply are not up for the task of deciphering clues and unraveling riddles and things like that. What I like about this is the cockatrice is a nice little in-between type of critter. Its physical combat abilities are negligible, and it's not intelligent per se. It has an animal intelligence level. It's not creating the master plan to rule the world. It's a freaking critter, you know? What makes it dangerous is its innate self-defense mechanism. It can petrify creatures by touch. Now, logically, this ability is innate. Whether or not it's consciously controlled has been the bone of contention for decades among many players and dungeon masters, and many of these people think it's active all the time, and other cockatrices are immune to it. Which, you know, otherwise how would they reproduce? And that's a valid concern. If it's active all the time and other cockatrices are immune to it, they can reproduce. You see what I'm saying? Many others feel that the monster actively turns the ability on and off as a fear response to aggression, which makes sense because it's off and when they're going to reproduce, and then, they get scared and it comes on. Either way, unless the victim saves versus petrification, they are turned to stone if they touch it. My personal thing, the way I see it, this has to be active all the time. Otherwise, if you surprise a cockatrice and kill it without, or you know, surprise it with a cage or whatever, well, you know, my point is it's better for it to be active all the time. That's my view. But you can run it any way you want. One of the things you got to be aware of, though, is whatever way you decide to do it, it's got to be consistent. You got to use the same way all the time. The cockatrice can be found on page 15 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. Be sure and read up on this critter very, very thoroughly before you use it. This thing can be devastating in its simplicity. As a dungeon master, if you're going to use a cockatrice, your dilemma is to try to entice your players to have their player characters touch the things. There are a number of ways you can accomplish this, but I have developed a preference for this feat over the years. My preference goes like this. Your player characters must be low on food or feel that they need more for whatever reason. Really, really stress that need. They've got to believe that they need more food for whatever reason. Like I said, either running low or whatever. They have a lot of mouths to feed, whatever. When they encounter the cockatrices, your description is everything. Big, funny-looking chickens with long tails, or weird-looking chickens with crazy wings and long tails. Something like that. The key phrase there is chicken. It's all in the delivery. No pun intended. But the chicken, that word chicken has to be in there, because, you know, you put a chicken in front of a starving man, yeah, it's going to be a dead chicken. I'm just saying. If your players kill them outright with weapons, they will have to pluck them. There's no way to get around that. If the power is active all the time, which is what I believe, it will still be in effect and they will need to make saving throws. If the power is turned on and off, then it's a 50-50 chance that it's on. Or if the dungeon master is really nice, he could rule that the power died with the critter. You know, that's a possibility as well. But then you get those players who want to save a few of these things for the eggs. Yeah, because they can have eggs every morning. For those players, the debate is a moot point. As soon as they touch the live critter, they have to make their saving throws or be petrified. And little word of advice, most petrified statues around these things are in the kneeling position because they have to kneel down to grab them. Years ago, I was running a group who had decided to explore the Underdark. Apologies for the next door neighbor's dog. Years ago, I was running a group who had decided to explore the Underdark. They outfitted for a month or so and then set off into the darkness. After the first month, they ran out of food. About a week later, their cleric was killed in an encounter with drow, and they were forced to flee. A week later, they butchered their mule. A few weeks after that, they were entertaining the idea of cannibalism. That's when I knew they were ripe for the big ugly chickens. I set it up, and 4 of them failed their saves. The 2 remaining player characters fled and later died while trying to sneak past the drow elves. Yeah, ain't I a stinker? Yeah, that's just it's low, it's low down, it's cold blooded, it's vicious. But nobody said they had to try to eat the chickens. Nobody said they had to. As a dungeon master, it is your job to set up encounters. You have to let the players decide what to do. They're presented with the big ugly chickens. They have to decide to touch them. You can't make them do it. As a player, if your character's low on food and you know it, and your dungeon master has been stressing that in his game, probably over multiple game sessions, and then suddenly big ugly chickens show up, yeah, it's time to be a little suspicious. I'm just saying. The Obliviacs. Now, I've been running Dungeons & Dragons a long time. I've been running Advanced Dungeons & Dragons since 1979. I've seen a lot of monsters destroy groups of players. One of the most insidious creatures in all of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons is the Obliviacs, otherwise known as the Memory Moss. You can find the entry for this creature on page 96 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Be sure to read up on it very thoroughly before you use it in your game. I say that every one of these monster videos. I say that because it's absolutely true. You got to know what you're using against your players. Obliviacs hang out in damp, dark areas like moss, like most moss types. This moss, however, has intelligence and is evil. Anyone within 60 feet of this creature is subject to magical attack by it. If the victim fails a saving throw versus spells, the Obliviacs steals all the memories from the creature for the last 24 hours. This includes memorized spells, should the victim have any. Should the memory moss be attacked, it can actually use those spells in its own defense. That's impressive. The most dangerous aspect of this creature is number appearing. Up to 12 of these creatures can be present at a time. Statistically speaking, if a group of players is forced to make several saving throws per round, the chances of failure are greatly increased. If you have a group of 6 and there's 12 of them, that means each player on average will have to make 2 saving throws per round. Once a player character fails, he has lost 24 hours of memory. Whatever happened in the last 24 hours in his mind is gone. The ones that successfully make their savings throws are forced to continue attempting to make the savings throws as long as they are in the area and as long as there are Obliviacs that have not been sated. Once an Obliviacs gets memories, it kind of goes dormant for 24 hours. But chances are a party of 6-player characters will be crippled in this way. If vital clues to the quest resolution were gained in that 24-hour period, the Obliviacs will take them. This will force the player characters to stay and try to regain those clues. This could give the Obliviacs time to steal those memories again. If this happens for an extended period of time, player character groups could run short of supplies and other necessities. This could cripple the group and stall your campaign. Player characters could literally starve to death or be overrun by monsters. Here's what I have found as a dungeon master is the most effective: placing multiple memory mosses in an area with a puzzle or some other time-consuming obstacle. This could prove deadly to the party. They might not ever figure out why. Because they're working on the puzzle, and then they lose 24 hours. Okay, fine. 24 hours later, they're still working on it, and then they lose 24 hours. 24 hours later, they're still working on it, and then they lose 24 hours. They could be there literally forever. And remember, 24 hours is 24 hours. That's a lot of time. And it's all the progress they've made on this puzzle would be lost. You see what I'm saying? These things can be insidiously deadly. I'm not saying you need to use these in your game, but they're not exactly friendly to parties. Not that any monster is, but most players aren't thinking of it.
They won't go looking for a black moss that's hanging out over on the wall somewhere. Most of them won't. I'm just saying. And if they do find it and try to attack it, whatever, if the spellcaster lost 24 hours, that critter's got 20 spells from those casters to defend itself with. That can be pretty bad. I'm just saying that the Obliviax can be quite deadly depending on how you use it. And if you keep it a secret, the players may never know how they died. That's the sad part. Memory is a weird thing to mess with.
Deadly puddings. First off, to understand how this monster works, to understand it, and how deadly it really can be, check out Black Puddings on page 10 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. The first one. Monster Manual 1. This version of the pudding, however, is found on page 102 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Read up on them very thoroughly before using them in your game. These monsters can be extremely deadly due to the fact that they blend in so well to their surroundings. The three varieties inhabit areas that allow their natural colors to hide them. Maybe they've evolved that way, I don't know. But they're there. Brown puddings inhabit marshes. Dun-colored puddings inhabit arid regions, so they look like sand. While white puddings dwell in cold areas, so they look like snow and ice. Their chances at surprise are ridiculous, and it allows them to attack with ferocity and with serious bonuses. Their resistances are formidable. Acid, cold, and poison have no effect. Lightning bolts and blows from weapons, can't read my own writing. Lightning bolts and blows from weapons simply divide the puddings into multiple smaller puddings. Fire and magic missiles are good attack forms to use against them. It's crazy. Each of these puddings attacks in basically the same way. They do different damages to different substances, so be sure to read across that, read through it very, very thoroughly. The damage that these things inflict is considerable, especially the white pudding. Speaking of white puddings, years ago, my friend Larry was running a game. I was playing along with 3 others, and we were 6th level, give or take. I want to say my dude was 5th, but anyway. We'd been traveling through a snow-swept mountainous region on our way to join up with another group of players to embark on a mission. So it was at the beginning of the thing, and we were going to get the whole group together, and we were half the group essentially. We stopped for the night in the ruins of an old tower. We set up guardian spells outside the tower and settled in for the night. Our thief went in and looked around and didn't see anything, so he said it was secure, so we set up our guardian spells outside and settled in for the night. Got a fire going, the whole 9 yards. One by one, our player characters were attacked. Each time, the other player characters were given the chance to awaken, and as luck would have it, we did not. One by one, the white pudding devoured us all. It was really sad. We never made our rendezvous. We all had to create new characters. And you go to sleep and never wake up, essentially, because you're eating in your sleep. It's crazy. And when the pudding lands on your head, which these things, which this guy, the Dungeon Master Larry, decided that's what... Because of the way we were arranged, we were sleeping with our feet to the fire, as it were. And this thing was able to go around and attack our heads first. I don't know what his logic was there, but that was what he determined. And Larry's a good dungeon master. He had a reason for it. I just don't know what it is. At any rate, nobody woke up. Everybody died. It was that simple. So yeah, read through these. If you're going to run these puddings in your game, read through them very thoroughly. Make sure your players can handle it, and just be careful, because they can destroy. They can eliminate key players. They can eliminate a lot of players. Just saying. Necrophidius. Necrophidius can be found on page 67 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Fiend Folio. Be sure to read up on it very, very thoroughly before you use it in a game. These creatures are exceedingly dangerous, also called a death worm. These critters are totally silent. They are immune to sleep, charm, and mind-affecting spells. They are immune to poison. Also, they never need to check morale. Furthermore, these things achieve surprise 50% of the time. They're very, very dangerous. The bite of this creature is insidious. Aside from doing a D8 in damage, 1 to 8 points, victims must make a saving throw versus magic or be paralyzed for 1 to 4 turns. That's 10 to 40 rounds. For those of you keeping track. Imagine what you could do to an enemy in a round where they can't move. Imagine what you can do to them in 4 rounds. Now imagine what you could do to them in 40 rounds. It's crazy. And the minimum, if they fail their save versus magic, the minimum length of paralyzation is 10 rounds. It's crazy. A party of 8. Never mind. It's just crazy. A special ability the Necrophidius can perform, if it's not surprised, is the Dance of Death. This is a hypnotic swaying which rivets the attention of any victim observing it. And unless a save versus magic is made, they're stuck there. Failure means the victims are in effect hypnotized and they cannot act, which leaves them pretty much prone. This allows the death worm to advance and attack unopposed. These things are insidious. They're very, very very dangerous. Don't use them on a group that's lower level. They're just bad. Necrophidius is not a wandering monster. These things are created for the specific purposes of either assassination or guarding. They're guarding something or they're sent to kill somebody. That's it. In one of those 2 roles are when the adventurers will encounter a death worm. Note that the 3 specific ways Necrophidius are created, the 3 specific ways that they're created. Also note that these things are not undead. Therefore, they cannot be turned by a cleric. They're not undead. They're like animated things. It's crazy. To give you an idea of how insidious and how deadly these things are, years ago, I was playing in my friend Gerald's game. Gerald is an excellent dungeon master and is exceedingly intelligent. I talk about him in some of my videos. The druid video where he turns into the polar bear and walks away. That's him. That's Gerald. One of our party had run afoul of an evil cleric, and that cleric sent a death worm after her. We were in camp, and the guard was surprised. He was bitten and failed his save. He died the very next round. Everybody else was still asleep. The death worm roused us and began its dance of death. One by one, we all failed our saves, and the entire party died. It was a total party kill. These things are just freaking nasty. They look like a skeletal snake with a skull on top as opposed to the snake's head. They're just freaking nasty. Yeah, be sure and before, as a dungeon master, be sure and read up on them before you use them. As a player, if you see one and you're not automatically hypnotized or automatically fail your save from a bite and be paralyzed, think twice before you decide to attack it, because you could easily end up dead. It doesn't even take a lot. This thing could accidentally kill you. It won't be on accident, of course, but all it takes is one little bit of bad luck and you're done.
The Osquip. OSQUIP, the Osquip. One of the favorite activities of most player character groups usually involves spelunking. For various reasons, many player character groups tend to find themselves underground. If that particular underground area happens to be under a town or in a sparsely inhabited area, one of the more dangerous monsters to run into would be the Osquip. The Osquip can be found on page 70 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Fiend Folio. Be sure to read up on those monsters before you use them in your game. There's an aspect to these guys, these critters, that I add when I play this. And I think that it makes the monsters a bit more challenging, a little more realistic. Let me just finish what I got here, and then I'll continue on. I'll get to it. The Osquip can be found on page 70 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Fiend Folio. Be sure to read up on these monsters before you use them in your game. Read up on them very, very thoroughly. The Osquip, on first glance, doesn't appear to be exceptionally dangerous. The first time you look at it, it looks just like a big rat, basically. It only has 3+1 hit dice and an armor class of 7. And most players would look at that and go, I can take that. That's no problem. The danger of these particular creatures comes when you look at the damage per attack and the number appearing. When you have 2 to 24 attacks in the swarm, with each hit doing 2 to 12 damage, the injuries can really add up. Imagine 10 hits doing 7 points each. That's 70 points of damage. You know what I'm saying? And what's worse, these Osquips can sometimes be in cahoots with Germaline, Mites, or Snaiads. Be sure to read up on those critters too. Take note that some of these allies come in great numbers as well. Now, one of the things that that I add to this, so I'll get into what I was going to say, what I was talking about earlier. If you read up on these things, they tend to feed on critters, mice, things like that. If you're eating mice, chances of getting a disease is pretty prevalent, especially in a world without penicillin, vaccines, or anything like that. Yeah, your chances of getting disease is pretty big. So whenever these things attack someone, whenever they're hit, I always grant the chance of a 1 or a 2% chance of an infection of some kind, disease, that kind of thing. That's just what I do, and that's completely optional. But to me, it makes more logical sense. Now, on with the video here. Excuse me. Years ago, I was playing in my friend Ronald's game. There were 8 players, and we were exploring the sewers of a town trying to find a secret way into a guild headquarters. The mission was not the sewers. The sewers were a way to get into the guild. Okay? We ran into a large group of mites, 18 of them. And 5 of us, including myself, were captured. The others fled into a side tunnel where a trap door dropped them into an Osquip lair. They were all killed. Later, the 5 of us came to. We were beaten and bloody and had been stripped of everything but our clothing. We were hopelessly lost because we had no idea where we were in the sewers, and we encountered the Osquips. Only 2 of us made it out of that tunnel system, and the rest, including me, had to make up new characters. These things can really mess up a party simply because of their alliances and their numbers. And these things do significant damage. They're the size of small dogs, but they're rats. Yeah, they can be quite nasty. That's all I'm saying. Now, and keep in mind, these things are designed for lower level players. Lower might not be, about mid-range characters. 5th, 8th level in that range, I think. Because they're 3+1 hit dice, but there can be a lot of them. They can number up to 24 of these things. So, Osquips are bad enough just as random monsters. Paired with one of their sometimes allies, they can really, really be devastating. So be sure to read up on them and their quote-unquote allies. Read up on all that stuff before you use them in your game. They can really devastate your party. And I like the Osquip because they're not used very often. They're not a lot of players know about them. So chances are you're going to get surprise.
Kamadan, however you want to pronounce it. Kamadan. The Commandant is a relative of the Displacer Beast, and in my opinion, it is just as deadly. The Commandant can be found on page 55 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Fiend Folio. Be sure to read through that description very, very carefully, very thoroughly, before you use this creature in your game. There are a number of reasons I feel that these beasts are exceedingly dangerous. First, their breath weapon, in and of itself, is not deadly, but it allows the creature to put creatures to sleep, to put adversaries, enemies, other creatures to sleep within 30 feet. The Cone of Sleep has a base diameter of 10 foot, so that in a narrow corridor or hallway or whatever, these things are devastating. Anything 4 hit die or less has no savings throw, and anything above that has to save versus breath weapon. Secondly, they get the standard 3 attacks, claw, claw, bite. But in addition, they also have a D4 plus 3 snake heads, which is 4 to 7 snake heads, and each of them gets to attack as well. The snake heads aren't poisonous, but they can each do damage. That's a lot of damn attacks. If the creature hits with all of its attacks, has 4 snake heads, that's the minimum amount. The damage to the target is 1 to 3, plus 1 to 3, plus 1 to 6, plus 1 to 4, plus 1 to 4, plus 1 to 4, and plus 1 to 4. That's 7 to 28 points of damage. That's going to kill easily kill any second or third level character. Okay? And that's what the minimum number of snakes. It could be 7 of them. So it could be a lot more damage too. I'm just saying. Initially, the Commandant should use its breath weapon every round until the enemy or targets close with it. This will put as many of them to sleep as possible so that it has a much easier fight and can feast later. Now, this is one of the things that I argue with other dungeon masters about. The book does not specify how many breath weapons the creature gets per day. Therefore, as I understand the rules, they are unlimited, once per round instead of its physical attacks. So, if you're 30 feet away and this thing hits you with its breath weapon and you make your save, you advance. If you're moving your full speed, you can get to it in one round. If not, it's going to be another round before you get there. That being said, it can hit you again. If they're separated by, say, a chasm or a portcullis or whatever, this thing can just use its breath weapon over and over and over until everybody's asleep, and then it can make its way over there and eat. Now, years ago, I was playing in my friend Mark's game. Mark is a very smart player, a very smart dungeon master, runs an excellent game. We had 5 player characters of 5th and 6th level. We were running from a large band of drow and were moving single file through a narrow hallway, heading for stairs to get out. Our point man, a fighter, yelled out, "There's something up here!" The Commandant immediately used its breath weapon, and everyone except the thief and cleric failed their saves. Both of them advanced to attack, and the creature hit them again. The drow came upon the Commandant feasting on our characters. Both of them failed their second savings throw. Yeah, it was devastating, and we never even got to swing at the thing. So, it's just a devastating thing. I suppose the cleric or one of the 2 characters could have took the time to wait and wake up the players again, but because it's just a sleep spell. But that didn't happen, so I don't know. Look up sleep as well to make sure you're doing it properly, but the point I'm getting at is these things can be very, very devastating if you use them properly. Luckily, number appearing is only 1, so, in melee combat, they can be defeated by a group, but it still can be quite devastating. I hope this finds everybody well, and again, I'm not trying to tell people how to play their game, I'm just giving advice from an old hack wargamer who's been doing this a long time.